So I'm gonna try and make a video about um, something I kind of learned about, and I think it's true, and I kind of see it the more I grow older, and this is like the role that money and power play in society, like at large, and then in general. Um, so I like reading like a lot of different things. And then I think a few months ago I was reading, just out of curiosity, reading on Wikipedia about some of the different like serial killers that existed. People like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. It just curious about like what like kind of transpired, what went on, and then um, how they were caught. A little bit about like their motivations and stuff, but really like the stories. And I kind of personally have always found like real life to be more interesting than fiction. I like watching movies or reading fiction books. I have in the past, but often like if you want to watch like a horror movie, like the equivalent, like the real life is more I mean, it's more real and it's more of a story. You know, it's not someone's not making it up. My point being, you can get an interesting kind of horror story from these real life cases, and I just was kind of curious to read about it, and I read about it, and I read about these different serial killers, and read a little bit about different some of those like mass murderers and stuff, but um, there's like school shooters and stuff, but then more like these serial killers that like it took like a while to be caught. And something that I saw that was interesting was that like a lot of them were like cleaner cut. Maybe they had like a decent income, or like they looked presentable, they looked like a certain part, like they looked ordinary and normal, and they could talk their way out of stuff. And this is how they kind of went without suspicion and without getting caught for 10 plus years, 20 plus years or longer, you know. um, Eventually it unraveled, and like the thing that I kind of got was that like if someone has like money and looks like clean cut and like has like a good job or a good position or something, like they're treated differently, and they're treated differently by like systems and by bureaucracies and stuff. um, I see this that like, and I'm sure I'll learn this more as I progress with business and entrepreneurship and other fields. But like, if you have like money, you have like power, and you can like influence things. You can influence change. You can make things happen. And if you don't, systems treat you differently. People treat you differently. Bureaucracies kind of treat you differently. Um, if you have money, you can and this is what I saw was like here in these cases, like I forget which serial killer it was, but maybe a couple of them, they picked people, their targets, as people that like couldn't defend themselves. They were like I think Jeffrey Dahmer picked like male prostitutes to like do stuff with first, and then like to kill, you know, something like that. And I think others like John Wayne Gacy. I think like it was like similar. Like he'd pick people that were like lower class, or like wouldn't be heard. And the impression that I got, like sometimes they had like little brushes with the police and other stuff, is that they were kind of cleaner cut. They had money, and people just kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt. And you see this with politicians. You see this with what happened with like Bernie Madoff. You see this with various SEC cases. Um, to some degree, if you have money, you can influence change in different things, and just influence public perception of you, you know. And and they were able to do this. So the serial killers kind of preyed on this. What's his name? Ted Bundy. What was a law student and like learned law really well, so that he can kind of defend himself, and that he could know that like, oh, okay, I can do this legally. This is where they're gonna go next. And then he kind of got to enjoy his sick dysfunctions, and like rape people and kill people based on like knowledge of the system, you know. um, Reading different books, reading like Henry Ford's autobiography and other books, I kind of learned that like systems are broken a lot of the time. Bureaucracies are broken. Um, I think if you want to make change and difference in the world, like you can do it on a small scale with like a certain job, But if you want to do it on a larger scale, it's important to do it, I think, in like business or something where you can do it independently. You can have wealth and then use it for good causes, and for making influence and change in the world. You know, businesses, especially if they are private businesses, they can operate at a certain way where, like, if they're not operating like ethically, or like if they're fucking people over, they'll like go broke, you know. And then if they're giving value to people, then they'll continue to grow, and then they can use that money to continue to further grow, but also to do good things with it in society. And I think change comes from wealth. Change doesn't really come from governments. Governments cause like stagnation, cause like more rules and more limitations. You know, bureaucracy is not a good thing necessarily. And what ends up happening with governments and systems is they create artificial things where like you can't fail, but it's like in a bad way, where it's like evolution and like nature, like they should be allowed to fail but they can't. Like they'll just be pumped with stimulus and more loans, more funding, and they just like print money out of thin air, you know. And that always comes at a consequence, and it's not like an immediate consequence, but it's like they say, like tossing it down the road like a few decades or a few years or something. It's like a later problem, you know, for future generations or other people. And that's not a good thing. um, I learned, yeah, that when you have like money, you can influence things, you can influence change, and that money changes people, power changes people, but like really it shows who they really are. You can see this in like 9 to 5 jobs or other bureaucracy like systems, where you see that, someone gets power, and then just how they change. Are they still nice? Do they still um, do good things, or are they suddenly very stubborn and authoritarian and like kind of mean to their like fellow human being, you know? um, there was like the Milgram experiment, and then I think like the Stanford prison experiment, where um, yeah, they put someone in power over another person, and then you could see like how quickly they turn into like a dick and stuff, you know, and are really bad to their fellow man, just given some power and some authority, even though it's just a title and it's not really any real power, real authority. And people do that when they don't have power over their own lives. They get some sort of power, and then that makes them feel significant, and then they have to exercise it and kind of control and force. But people that are good leaders and that have true power um, can be different. They can be like the stoic leaders, where they maybe bring about discussion, bring about renaissances and change. They bring about positive discussions. A lot of certain CEOs, if they're a good CEO, they encourage harsh feedback. They encourage talking back to your boss, and kind of having discourse and disagreement so that they can further innovate and grow. You know, this is an important thing. So like wealth and power kind of go hand in hand, and I think if you have a pure heart, or like you have like meaningful pursuits and purposes with what you're going to do with your wealth, then it's a good thing to pursue wealth, because it's the way you can make positive change in the world. You can't really do it that much in systems. You can do it on a small scale as one person. You can be the best teacher you can be the best professor, you can be the best engineer, or best nurse, best doctor, best plumber, whatever. You're doing good for society, and that's a good thing, but it limits to the scale of just you. If you want to bring systemic change and larger changes, potentially that takes a team, and that takes bigger organizations. And then when you want to do bigger things, it's like good luck trying to do that within a system, because each system has its inherent flaws and weaknesses. um, and I remember my mentor would tell me about this a lot when I was like in my early 20s, like 18, 19, and then early 20s. And just how systems are important, and that like as like businesses, you can do some good while you're like a smaller system, and then as you grow larger, at some point you'll kind of turn into a bureaucracy yourself. And it's important to try to keep that small-minded vibe and not turn into a bureaucracy. But it's tricky, and it's like you do that, you start as a rebel. It's like a life, like a hero's journey cycle, where it's like some person is in a system, they work the 9 to 5, and then they're like, F this, like I want to quit, I want to do my own business, I want to break off from the system. So they do, and then they start their business, and it's just them for a while, and they're struggling, and then they get one person, two person, they get some sales, they grow, and then they grow some more. Eventually, after 5 or 10 years, they become a millionaire, and then maybe they continue to grow. If they grow enough, um, over a decade, couple of decades, then at some point they become the new systems, you know? They become the new bureaucracy. They become the new man, if that makes sense. And you see that sort of with Google and Facebook and Amazon and stuff, where they become so big that they're their own entity, you know? Um, so at that point, it's tricky because then you're the bureaucracy, and you want to make sure that you don't get slow. You don't want to get stagnated like your bureaucracy. You want to make sure that you can still have healthy competition, that you have the ability to lose, that you're competing with other people. Because if you become a true monopoly, then there's no necessity, there's no need for innovation or getting better, you know, because you win regardless at that point. And then when that happens, then you can stagnate, and then you don't continue to get better. Um, but so that kind of happens, and then like for that reason, you want to have like Amazon calls it like a day one mentality, where like it's always day one, and they try to keep that small minded feel. Like same Apple, like they try to, a lot of these companies, they try to really remember like they're still like a startup, like a small company, even though they're not. And like you just want to fend off that risk of bureaucracy and of turning into like a big government body. um, but yeah, I think wealth and power can be used for good things, for positive things, for bringing about positive changes in the world, in technology and innovation, in disease prevention, in health, in medicine, and all these different fields, biology, I don't know, technology. There's so much you can do with wealth, and you can do more, in my opinion, than you can in any government system. Governments can't really do anything. Governments only really slow things down, and they put in rules and stuff, which to some degree you need some rules. You need that for social order and for a civilization to function. But it's that balancing act of having too many rules and having stupid rules, and just versus having like the freedom for innovation, for some people to kind of like equity of opportunity, where some people can kind of come up um, and rise up to come from being from nothing to making significant livings, like you know, like become a millionaire from starting from like really humble beginnings. um, if you look today, who has the most power in the world outside of um, outside of like, I'd say like if you're like a drug lord or something illegitimate, and like some underground people, which I don't know that much about. But outside of them, it's like the tech companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon. These are um, private companies that went public. They're companies that hire a lot of people and are kind of running the world, and they're completely disparate from the most part from government. You know, they get to make their own decisions. They can succeed or they can fail. They have a lot of freedom to bring about change, and kind of do positive things for the world, whereas governments and bureaucracies and other systems are pretty limited, and are stagnant in their growth and what they can really do. um, Times have changed, and I don't know, like a lot of change comes from wealth, comes from power, comes from innovators, um, comes from these people that have broken off from the system and like done these things, taken these risks. But if they're doing it for meaningful reasons, then positive things can potentially come from it. You know, if they're, the purpose is good and the goals are good goals and meaningful goals, then good things can result from it. um, but yeah, these are just interesting topics, and like I learn more about it, and I see like in society, yeah, like you dress nice, you don't have tattoos, people treat you differently. If you're clean cut, people treat you differently. If you have money, you go to first class, you're clean shaven, you um, comb your hair, like all these little things, appearance, and people will treat you differently. And if you don't, people will also treat you differently. If you have like, if you get tatted up and get face tats and stuff, face tattoos, you look a certain part, people will respond and treat you that way. And then if you have the money or don't have the money, then based on that, they'll further treat you a certain way, you know? And and I don't know, as human beings, we're individual entities, and then we have like other people, and then we have the environment, and then like we respond and react to the environment, you know, and we respond and react to how other people treat us, and then how other things are kind of going on in the environment. So all that kind of plays a part. I think Elon Musk had kind of said that, like, he's like, oh, if you're president, you're like captain of a giant ship, and then you have like a tiny little rudder. And I think that's the significance of that being that, like, you really can't bring about that much change. There's not a lot you can do. I tell people that if you are kind of lateral thinking and you are business minded, you can think outside of the box and you're creative, and you can work really hard. Potentially, you could do good in business. I wouldn't recommend it to most people, but I think it's maybe the best way that you can bring about good change in the world, and you can make a lot of wealth. Um, I'd seen too that, like, just in jobs, people don't make much. Even like you look at like a doctor, a surgeon, a politician, a governor, no one makes that much compared to the entrepreneur. You always make the most money if you work for yourself. And there are 18-year-old kids, 20-year-old kids, 22-year-old kids, 23-year-old kids that make more, like a ton more than the governor does, or that than surgeons do, or than doctors do. And there's more of these kids than you would think. If you went back pre-internet, it wouldn't be as much, but now, like today, there's the more I learn about business, like, it's very possible with paid advertising, with like Amazon FBA and these other business opportunities. Like, there's a lot of like very legitimate businesses that are not that hard. You don't have to be a super genius. You can be just above average smart and like really driven and hardworking, and go out and work these things and make money more than everyone else, you know. And then with that money, you can do good in the world. You can do positive things in the world. It doesn't have to be something that corrupts your soul, and that um, you spend on like wasteful things, or on material things. If you choose not to, you know, you don't have to spend it on bullshit. You can bring about positive change and do good things with your wealth. There's nothing that stops you from doing it. So that's kind of what I've learned. Like, wealth and power make people treat you differently. People treat you differently based on your appearance, based on your looks. I try to take care of my looks a lot, because people fucking treat you differently based on how you look, and based on those little things. Um, and then after that, um, just it's hard to bring about change within a system if you're like a lawyer, or you're a doctor, or you're a nurse. Like, and I have friends that are all of these, or you're an attorney or an engineer. Like, there are little flaws and problems within the system, and you can be happy, just work your good job, and and make an honest living, and do good as you, the individual. And a lot of people, that's like the best path, and it's a very noble thing. It's not a bad thing, especially if they're fulfilled and they're happy doing that work. Because society needs them. But if you're independent thinking, or if you wanted to do certain things, bigger things, and bring about systemic changes, it's tough to do that within that role, or any role. It's like you have to kind of break off from it, and do your own thing, you know. And businesses can bring about change. It's hard work, and there's more risk involved, and it takes thinking differently. I think business is very counterintuitive, and it's there's like a lot of thinking outside the box. But yeah, like, that's where change kind of comes from, is like from wealth, from power, from systems, and then like from wealth and power, like people that are funded. You know, if you go back to the Renaissance times, like, yeah, people were doing a lot of cool things, but it's because they were funded by patrons. You know, they were funded by people that were funding the engineers, the artists, the sculptors, and the writers. And this is true in different Renaissance times. If you see like the Italian Renaissance, or like the time of Da Vinci or Michelangelo, those times. But then also there's like the Islamic Renaissance, where it was the same thing, that the I have to like remember, but like the Muslim rulers at the time, the dynasties, they wanted to study all these fields, and they had libraries, and they brought all the scholars together, and they had them study many fields, and brought different minds together, and there were a lot of polymaths during that time. I think it's like 1100, 1200 AD, where like they had like one person that like knew math, literature, algebra, botany, what do you call it, like surgery and medical stuff, and all these different fields and all these different experts together, and they pooled their knowledge, um, and all this was possible because it was funded, you know. And it's like, that's the thing, is like, pursue wealth, and then you can do good things with it. You can do meaningful things with it. I think a lot of billionaires can be pretty honest, pretty upfront, and like do good things for the world, you know. And they can do it silently. They can stay out of the limelight if they choose to, and privately do a lot of good without like a lot of bullshit restricting them. The downside of it is that it's hard work, and you have to keep getting better or you die. And it's hard work. It's extremely difficult, and like there's a lot of potential for failure, and it can be a lonely path at sometimes. But there aren't that many limitations, and like you get to have less of the fetters that other people kind of do in society, and it's just possible to bring about a lot of good change. Um, so that's kind of what I think of how like wealth and power kind of go together, and like why you can make positive changes in the world with wealth and power. Um, that's my kind of view on things. I don't know. I'll probably look back a year or two later and think this is kind of dumb, but yeah, that's my view on things from different things that I've studied and kind of learned. So yeah.